Okay, so at this point, I will turn over to my colleague Jolie. Go ahead and introduce the topic a little bit more and then introduce Wilson, and we can get on with the main part of the program. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ruth. Always a pleasure to be here with everyone. I'm Julie Martin with FloridaMakes, and I am excited about today's topic for sure. CMMC in general can be confusing, and no one really knows what the status of things are, and all of these things that play a part. It's not just our computers, it's our facilities. It's a whole lot of things that come into our cyber security and cyber awareness, citizenship, and all of that passes to all of us as both individuals in the community and as business people. So I'm excited to have Wilson here. I think, gosh, Wilson, I think we've met a couple of years ago now at one of our Make More summits and such. And it's been a real journey for cybersecurity as NIST has finalized some things and that transition has taken place. So I'm excited to introduce Wilson. And Ruth started it off, but Wilson has a ton of knowledge as that cybersecurity compliance expert, certainly understanding the requirements, including NIST 800, 171, and the CMMC arena, as I like to call it, because CMMC, kind of like manufacturing, it's a team sport. It takes everyone to get it accomplished. So Wilson founded Jün Cyber and has led readiness programs and efforts for many defense contractors, not just here in Florida, but nationwide, helping our companies, our manufacturers really build scalable compliance programs. And for those of us who are participating in, cyber efforts and awareness and tracking the bad guys, as the case might be, it's important that we understand how to assess our systems, how to secure that sensitive data, how to make sure that we are compliant both as good citizens and as our clients and customers and manufacturing require. And Wilson's background in both government and private sector security operation really brings that practical, hands-on, no fluff approach to what we're doing and what our companies need to prepare for in this real world cyber arena that we all find ourselves, because it's not just our companies, it's all of us as citizens having to really understand what that means. Of course, our manufacturing industrial base has some special requirements and things to protect their intellectual property and such. And so that's why I'm excited to really be able to turn it over to Wilson and have this conversation take place. I'll be managing, Q&A, so please put your questions in the chat. I will see all of that, and we will ask those questions a little later on so that Wilson can stay focused on the topic, and then we'll bring those questions in as we kind of wrap up. We'll have a Q&A. So with that said, I'll turn things over to Wilson.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I don't know if you know this, but I've been a third-party provider for FloridaMakes for at least 5 years now. So it's great to be here. Thank you, Ruth, Jolie, and FloridaMakes team for having me. It's a really awesome opportunity to talk to manufacturing companies about this important topic. Again, my name is Wilson. I'm the CEO of Jün Cyber. Credentials, as far as CMMC is concerned, of certified CMMC professional, as well as a certified CMMC lead assessor. I'm just pending my tier 3 investigation. So once that's done, we're good to go there. As far as my background, I'm a retired Marine and Army National Guard officer. I have a lot of experience with cybersecurity, doing the defense work with the risk management framework, if you're familiar with that. But my civilian experience includes a lot of manufacturing itself. So I started my cybersecurity manufacturing career with ABB. They are a power automation company based out of Switzerland. I was over there at their U.S. Headquarters in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then after I retired from the Army National Guard, my wife says, we've been away from home for too long. We need to go back home to Florida. So we came back down to St. Pete, where I was the director of IT and information security for a defense manufacturing company that dealt with semiconductors. And my charge was to make sure that the entire network was NIST 800-171 compliant. So not only do I know the requirements, I've actually built the systems to make sure that they were auditable and make sure they met compliance for NIST 800-171. So again, thank you all for coming to my presentation. This is Don't Guess, Get CMMC Certified. And with the CMMC, what is it? All right, for those of you that don't know, it's a framework developed by the Department of Defense to secure the defense industrial base. And the purpose is twofold, is to protect federal contracting information, or FCI, and controlled unclassified information, which is CUI, or you would say CUI. And then we want to be able to standardize cybersecurity practices across contractors. So how does this impact you? As manufacturers, you're familiar with, quality assurance, ISO 9001. You get that certification. Everybody's kind of has the same processes, so we know what's going on. So historically, standardization of cybersecurity practices hasn't been happening. So this is the government's way of saying, hey, we need to standardize this across the board so everybody's doing the same thing. So who needs the CMMC? Any company that's handling FCI or CUI as part of DoD contracts. And this means manufacturing companies that are involved in the defense supply chains. So why does it matter for you? Compliance is non-negotiable, right? It is required for eligibility to win and maintain DoD contracts. Just yesterday, one of my clients has shown me one of the contracts that came out with language that said, you need to be able to show your system security plan and your plan of action and milestones. If you don't know what that means, we're going to get to that documentation, but they're already putting in contract language saying you got to have NIST 800-171 compliance already, which you should have done already if you're doing defense contract work already, and have your system security plan, which basically lists out all the NIST 800-171 controls, your network diagrams, your data flow diagrams, and you got to be able to show that to the government. And if you have any findings, they need to be done within 30 days. That's already in contracting language. So compliance is non-negotiable. Business continuity, you want to make sure that you avoid any penalties, contract loss, or legal issues due to non-compliance, right? So if you don't meet the 30-day requirement based on the contract that I just talked about, you're going to lose that. You're going to lose that contract. A competitive advantage, stand out as a secure, trusted contractor in the defense sector. There are primes now that are saying to their supply chain, are you moving towards NIST 800-171 compliance? Do you have a supplier performance risk system score, SPRS, in the system? Do you have it in the system? And if the answer is no, you could put your name on the do not call list, because they are not choosing companies that are not moving towards CMMC compliance, either level 2 or level 1, or if they don't have their SPUR scores in, because they don't have the time. And they're also required contractually to make sure that all of their suppliers are able to handle CUI if they have to handle CUI. So if you're not doing that, you may run into some issues. But on the flip side, if you are doing that, and we have seen this with our clients especially, is that now they're getting more calls because those the suppliers that they once had, now that pool is smaller. So you're going to stand out as a secure, trusted contractor in the defense sector. And then the most important thing, I think, and this is because I'm biased, is that it's cybersecurity enhancements, right? We want to have that standardization across the board, not only just to protect the company, but protect the defense industrial base in general. It's for national security. So we're safeguarding critical systems, the supply chain, against a lot of changes that are going on with cyber threats. So let's talk about federal contracting information and controlled unclassified information. So these are the definitions and some examples. So the definition of federal contracting information, or FCI, is that it's non-public information provided by or generated for the government under a contract. Some examples: contract terms, project schedules, and specifications. Uh, the protection requirement is compliance with CMMC Level 1. All right. And then with controlled unclassified information, or CUI, the definition is information requiring safeguarding or dissemination controls under laws or policies. This can include technical data, blueprints, and ITAR information. And the protection requirement is compliance with CMMC Level 2. Now, the definition and some of these are very, very high level examples. There's a whole list of things that can be CUI. However, we know that the government has to be able to identify what is CUI in the contracts. And based on conversations that I've had with peers and with folks that have gone to the industry conferences, they know that they've not done the best job. So we could see that there are going to be modifications of how that's going to be identified and how that's going to be communicated to the defense contractors, hopefully in the next few months. So why does it matter? It's because the correct classification ensures proper scoping and security measures. And we're going to talk about scoping here in the next slide. So what is scoping? All right, scoping is identifying and categorizing assets that need to meet CMMC compliance. So what we're trying to do here is limit the scope of the assessment to reduce complexity and cost. I'll get to that in a moment. We want to make sure that also all assets handling FCI and CUI are appropriately secured. So for you, what are the key questions you should ask is, what are assets that process, store, or transmit CUI? What are my assets that process, store, or transmit FCI? All right. And then what are the systems that support the security of these assets? Right. So let me give you an example. You have a server and you have a laptop. The server has CUI on it. That is a CUI asset. The laptop doesn't touch the server and it doesn't handle CUI, but it handles the contracts. That is a federal contracting information asset. So that's an FCI asset. Now there's different categories of that the CMMC lists out for assets. All right. First is CUI assets. These are systems that process, store, These are systems that process, store, transmit CUI. And it's the same thing with FCI assets. These are systems that directly process, store, or transmit FCI. Security protection assets are systems that provide security functions such as firewalls or SIEMs. Contractor risk managed assets are capable of handling CUI, but they're not supposed to be handling CI or not intended to do so. So for example, if we're doing a data classification exercise with that server and that laptop, that server is a CUI asset. That laptop can handle CUI, but it doesn't. It's not meant to be. So that would be considered a contractor risk managed asset. And then you have specialized assets. These could be like your CNC machines, all your manufacturing equipment, IoT devices, anything that the government furnishes you, GFE, government furnished equipment. Those would be specialized assets. And then you have out of scope assets. These are things that are outside of your boundary, so to speak. So when we scope, right, you may have just a set of assets that are within a network that are within scope of a CMMC assessment. And then you have another network in the same facility, right, with a bunch of other servers and laptops. Well, because it's not handling CUI or FCI and it's over here, right? And it's logically separated, and you have all the servers and laptops over here. That means that those would be out of scope assets. All right, so examples of manufacturing specialized assets, should say specialized assets. So specific assets. So CUI assets. So ERP systems storing production schedules tied to DoD contracts. Engineering workstations accessing sensitive project files. Two examples of security protection assets: firewalls, right? VPNs. If you're not familiar with a security incident event management platform, that could be it's a software that takes all the logs from your computers and looks at everything and makes sure that there are no incidents, or if there is an incident, we could trace it and we could take action on it. But that SIEM platform for monitoring and network activity, that would be a security protection asset. Specialized assets. I talked about the CMMC machines and the PLCs. Those would be considered specialized assets. Why? It's because you can't harden them with the NIST 800-171 controls. You can't. And then you have IoT-enabled devices like smart sensors in the production lines. You can't harden those. So we need to be able to identify those that are within that CU-wide network and be able to label them appropriately. And then I already gave an example of out-of-scope assets. These are non-networked or air-gapped manufacturing tools. They're not handling CUI, but they're not even on your network. So how do we define our scopes? First, we have to understand our network and everything that exists on the network. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean just your computers. That means your people, your process, and your technology, right? So your people, who's handling CUI, right? Who's handling CUI? What processes are the ones that handle CUI or have to deal with CUI? And technologies, what systems? What systems do you use to store, process, or transmit CUI? I put facilities here too because there are physical security requirements that are required for you to pass the CMMC audit. So we need to understand every facility that has CUI in it. And what we also need to do is within that same network, we need to categorize all the other kind of assets, the specialized assets, the security protection assets. So all of those need to be understood. And then we create a data flow, right? I talked about the process of understanding how CUI, the processes that handle CUI, right? You need to be able to understand how CUI is processed, stored, and transmitted within your network, within your facility. So from a logical standpoint, does your prime contractor give you CUI, and where does it go? Is it in a FedRAMP moderate storage solution, right? That is CMMC compliant, and then they put it in that drive, and do you grab it and do you put it on your laptop? And then from that laptop, you distribute it to your engineering team, and that's where it stops. We need to understand that flow, and you need to be able to put that in your data flow diagram. All right, let's talk about a physical one. For example, same example, the engineer prints out that schematic, whatever it is. He prints out the schematic. It's labeled CUI. It's now a physical CUI. It's on paper media. What do they do with it? Do they just leave it on their desk, or does it go into a secured file cabinet? Right? So understand your processes in how you handle CUI, and you'll be able to create a data flow diagram. And the next thing to do is, if you're able to, is to use logical means to segregate things into your CUI network that only handle CUI, and keep as much as you can out of scope as possible. Why? To just keep it simple. Keep it simple, right? We want to make sure that we use these means to keep it simple for you, and then the less complexity equals less cost for the assessment. Really, it boils down to that. And then we talk about the documentation. You need to create the system security plan and the network diagrams. And then after that is to engage with a certified assessor and validate the scoping decisions that you've made, do a gap assessment, make sure that all the controls have been met. And if you do have anything that is an open control objective finding, or anything that anything that they find that is missing, you can correct it before you actually have a formal assessment. Eight. Okay, so logical separation, again, firewalls to segregate CUI traffic and systems. Role-based access controls. What does that mean? That means only engineers have access to CUI and not your HR department. But how do you do that? You do that through, Microsoft 365. You do that through group policy. Technical means, you can do that. VLANs for network segmentation. So if you have a technical provider, ask them, hey, I have these CUI assets. Can we create a network specifically for these CUI assets, so we can make sure that it's protected and it's isolated? Physical separation. Make sure that you have air gap systems with no direct network connections. Make sure that you have access controls in place for areas with sensitive equipment that deal with CUI. What does that mean? Like, for example, you have that PLM, the PLC, and you have the CNC machines that handle CUI. Maybe they need to be behind a locked door, right? Or maybe you have those servers that handle CUI. They should be in a closet with a locked door, and nobody should be able to get into it. You should be able to show how you do that. And then in regards to manual data transfer methods, make sure that you're using secure USB drives, data drives that meet the compliance for CMMC and NIST 800-171. So some of the challenges that I see for manufacturers are that legacy systems are difficult to harden. Why? Because they have operating systems that can't download and install the current modern cybersecurity features that are required now. And then also, you have older machines that have been doing these things, the computers that have been doing these things for years and years. Retrograding and upgrading the systems can be costly. Another thing is operational technology and IoT security risks. Securing OT and IoT devices are complex, and vulnerabilities can disrupt production or expose sensitive data. So a lot of it has to do with, okay, how do I balance security and operations? We want to be able to implement security without impacting efficiency. And that is challenging because when you start putting security requirements on systems, stuff breaks, right? And you have to be able to get stuff done. So how do we balance that? And then supply chain considerations. Like I said before, primes are now requiring their subs or their supply chain, if there's a DFARS flow down requirement, to be compliant with the CMMC, or they need to show that they are level 1 or that they are moving towards level 2. You may need to consider that if you pass on CUI to your partners and your vendors. All right, so let's talk about documentation requirements. So for the CMMC, NIST State Under 171, it is required to have a system security plan. And like I said before, this shows how you meet every single control, as well as shows the assets that exist in your system and the asset categories that are assigned to them. And it also labels out your processes. You want to be able to show that in your system security plan. So it is a document that has a template that's available, and you're able to put all of that information there. It includes also your key personnel that are responsible for the system. As far as the asset inventory, you need a complete list of categorized systems and equipment. This goes into your system security plan. You need to make sure that it's accurate and up to date. One of the problems that I see are that asset inventories are looked at once and then never looked at again. You need that. Part of the controls is to make sure that you're continuously looking at these. So like the Deming cycle, plan, do, check, act, it's the same thing. You have to make sure that you're constantly having the continuous improvement and continuous monitoring cycle to ensure that your asset inventory is complete. It's the same thing with your network diagrams. This is the visual representation of data flow and asset interconnections. And lastly, is you need to have policies and procedures. How do you run your information security program? And it shouldn't be like my MSP or my IT service provider does this for us. No, you have to have rules that people have to follow. Like, for example, your acceptable use policy. What does that mean for your organization? That should be written down. Do you have an information security policy? That is another requirement. You have to be able to show how you have access control, how you're doing maintenance on your systems, what are all of these policies going to do, and how they're going to help your organization is going to be able to tell the assessor, these companies, this organization that's being assessed right now has all the documentation that is needed. And I could look and walk down like an SOP, walk down, see what they're actually doing, and then assess whether or not they are doing it. So we need to make sure that those policies and procedures are in place. And talking about MSPs, right? In the CMMC language, they're called external service providers. And how do they fit into the CMMC? Is that if they are providing any kind of security services to you, then they would be part of the CMMC assessment. They would be part of the CMMC scope. So for example, we had talked about the security incident and event management tool. So if you have somebody that's doing that for you, that security protection asset that I was talking about, that person needs to make sure that they are also following the CMMC guidelines and they can show that they are compliant to the rules, right? We need to make sure that the certifications like FedRAMP Moderate are there for tools that handle CUI. So when we're talking about the drives that are handling CUI, they need to be FedRAMP Moderate. They need to be able to show that documentation. All right, what are some other things you should look for in an ESP or your IT provider? Are they handling information security seriously for the organization, right? Do they have their SOC 2 compliance? It's just an item to think about. The other thing is that if you do have these organizations that are supporting your CMMC efforts, they need to be able to provide you a shared responsibility matrix, right? Specifically on how they're handling specific controls and control objectives for your organization, right? And then the other part is that they should have service level agreements and compliance documentation ready for the assessor to look at. So when the assessor comes, they should be part of the team that's with you to be able to provide whatever they need. So those SLA agreements and those compliance documentation need to be reviewed and maybe modified to make sure that they meet your requirements as an organization, but also fit in with the CMMC requirements. So examples of external service providers are like managed service providers for IT and cybersecurity. And then you have cloud service providers hosting CUI. All right, so preparing for the assessment. I have it here as pre-assessment activities, training and awareness, documentation maintenance, and engage early. So when it comes to pre-assessment activities, we talked about scoping. When we have the scoping done, then you can start looking at the CMMC assessment guide, level 2 for CUI or level 1 for FCI, and start going down and saying, are we doing this? And as you turn to no's into yes, right? Or if you need somebody to help you to understand if you have a lot of no's, then when you get to the point where you're ready to be mock assessed is when you call a provider to say, I'm ready for a mock gap assessment or a gap assessment to CMMC level 1 or level 2, because then they'll be able to say, okay, yes, you are doing this, and no, you are not doing this. And those professionals that are there to help you should also be able to provide you recommendations on how you can meet the requirements. So we want to be able to address the gaps as we're doing these mock assessments or after the mock assessments before the actual assessment. The other part is that everybody thinks that CMMC is just an IT thing, but it's not. If you look at the requirements, it's an everybody thing. It includes HR. It includes your facility security, right? It also includes your IT folks, right, and your cybersecurity folks. So depending on how large your organization is, you're going to have a lot of people. So you need to make sure that they understand what the CMMC is and why it's important, because they have to protect the CUI and they also have to protect FCI. They have to understand that the processes that are going to be put in place or are in place to protect this type of information. The other part is to make sure, again, your documents are up to date, like your network diagram, your data flow diagram, your system security plan, your asset inventory. We need to make sure they're kept up to date to reflect changes in operations or systems. So if you add a system, you need to update your stuff, right? And then engage early. That's what I tell folks all the time. It's like, listen, work with people that know what they're doing, right? You have FloridaMakes that can connect you with third-party providers, work with certified assessors, work with people that they've already vetted, and to identify risks and provide you solutions. You have the opportunity with FloridaMakes to do that. I would say engage early and engage often. All right, so kind of repeating what I said earlier, the benefits for CMMC compliance for manufacturers: you maintain contract eligibility. It's required if you're going to handle CUI or FCI. You have a stronger cybersecurity posture. You have a less likelihood of somebody going to exploit your systems, right? And because we have a standardized way of doing cybersecurity across the defense industrial base, we want to be able to attract business, to increase revenue, right? If you show that you're CMMC compliant early, you'll be able to compete for those contracts with a smaller pool. And then with that, you'll have a reputation. You'll be able to establish the trust with the DoD and other stakeholders that are within your circle and out of your circle, to be able to know that you're a manufacturer that they can trust. So bottom line is inventory and classify assets, develop your SSP asset inventory and network diagrams, and get with a certified professional for guidance. Okay. With that, here's my information if you need it. Please connect with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email if you have any questions. I'd love to be able to help you. And FloridaMakes will connect as well with any third-party provider that they have that has CMMC expertise. And again, thank you for your time.